today I want to ask a very important question before I play a clip for you. Do you think South Africa can ever be liberated while other countries within Africa are still colonized and are still not liberated? Do you think there's ever going to be or any country that's going to enjoy its liberation while other countries within Africa are not liberated? That's the question. And then you can answer your question the way you want. I have a clip here. I want you to listen to this clip from Imam Ahmed explaining the reason why there's no any country within Africa that can enjoy its liberation while other countries within Africa are not liberated. Of course, you can have your own opinion. This is his opinion. Take a listen at this.
As someone who's lived under apartheid, how do you see Pan-Africanism or the idea of a unified Africa? Because Kwame Nkrumah, who was the president of the first independent African state, Ghana, said his country's independence was meaningless without the independence of every single other African nation. Is that a pipe dream, do you feel?
No, it isn't. He expressed it very well. He says, unless every square inch of Africa is liberated. Ahmed bin Bella, the first president after the success of the Algerian Revolution, said exactly the same, that the liberation of Algeria is meaningless unless we're going to liberate the rest of Africa. Now, Pan-Africanism also is not just a continental concept, it also includes the people in the diaspora. Just last night there was a documentary on the slave trade in, for example, Jamaica. Look at the visuals coming through television now on Haiti. I never imagined that people could still be living in such poverty right on the doorstep of Miami. Right? So who is responsible for keeping the poor dispossessed, ignorant, diseased, and discriminated against? And I think, yes, a new social order is possible. As one of the other former Robben Island prisoners said, throughout his whole life, he died on Boxing Day, the 26th of December last year, as Professor Dennis Brutus. And he persisted in the idea that an alternative world is possible, and definitely an alternative economic order must be the prerequisite for that.
Well, the first criticism people might raise when you make that statement is that the alternative to capitalism, what was defined as socialism in the USSR, former USSR, has been seen to be a complete failure. What would you say to that statement? What is socialism in the 21st century?
Yes. The fact that the Soviet Union was established excuse me, and maintained through terror under Stalin, bearing in mind the conditions under which he had to operate, and also during the Second World War when Hitler actually attacked the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union more than survived, because you can't pull a society from a semi-feudal state into the 1950s and compete with space exploration and nuclear weapons, etc., if something significant had not happened. Where there is a difference of opinion is the fact that when we talk about nationalization, it's not the same as socialization. Because in South Africa we had a lot of things nationalized, but the bulk of the people did not benefit from it. Whereas when you socialize the land and you socialize the economic system, especially health system and the educational system, it means that the people themselves are in control of the process and they decide what is beneficial or non-beneficial for themselves. And nobody can reverse that. Whereas if you nationalize, even through legislation especially, you can reverse that at the stroke of the pen. And that is not what we want. Also, people must determine what are their needs and what are their wants. What is it that the African people need at this moment? They need an overdose of education. But that is not going to come about if we don't even have a philosophy of education. We don't have enough qualified teachers. So we've had almost, 5 ministers of education, and none of them have been able to reverse the trend. And for one and one reason only. They don't seem to understand that the primary purpose of education is to teach human beings how to live with other human beings. That was the greatest failure of apartheid.
Yeah.
And they failed because apartheid as a system was based on irrationality.
Well, let's go to a much more rational kind of thinking, which may answer that question that you've posed. Spiritualism is something Africa is not short of. We have people who are passionate Christians, passionate Muslims, passionate animists, but very passionate about their spiritual heritage. How do you see a resolution, a kind of unification, if you like, of thinking around spiritual thought within Africa? Because all the Western media predominantly tells us is that Muslims and Christians will forever be fighting.
Yeah, it's a blatant lie. It serves the interest to pitch on the basis of divide and rule, to put one group against another, one tribe against another, and they reap the benefits. And this has been happening since the oppressors set foot in Africa. Just look at the division that they caused from 1884 onwards. And prior to that, from 1432, with the advent of the African slave trade, they first had to dehumanize Africans by saying they are heathens, they are backwards, they are barbarians, etc. So once you've dehumanized the people, then the next stage is you can safely eliminate them and having a clear conscience. A slave trade endured for 400 years. And in that period, according to Basil Davidson, he says in a book called Black Mother, approximately and conservatively 100 million Africans were taken off the African continent. Now, when you take a slave, you normally choose the best, the strongest, the fittest, the most fertile. And that is how we land up with these magnificent specimens in what is called the New World.
Yes.
Right? The descendants of Hussein Bolt.
Yes.
What a magnificent specimen of humanity. They even call him an alien because there's nobody on planet Earth that runs as fast as he does. But all of this indicates that slavery destroyed and ravaged large sectors of the African population, both in South Africa, where slavery only ended on the 1st of December 1832. Angola has a terrible history of slavery, massacres, Mozambique, the West Coast, the Gold Coast as they used to call it. And we can't undo that, but at least there should be reparations for that. And that is something that needs to get into the international arena.
But what would you say to a young person, because new young souls are being born every second that we're speaking, a young African who is looking forward to the future? I mean, what would you say to them in terms of the hopes and dreams that you would like to see within your lifetime? What kind of inspiration perhaps could the Quran give, or the Bible, or any kind of spiritual thinking to help young people live lives that are of benefit to all?
Yeah, it's a very important question. Just a few days ago, one elderly retired principal said to me, you know, in the pre-Islamic era, and then I said, just wait a minute, when was that? When was God born? And then she understood that there's been no period in man's life that can be called pre-Islamic, because they think Islam started with the birth of the Prophet or with the revelation of the Quran. But then the Quran itself says that Abraham and Moses and Jesus were all Muslims. They submitted to the will of God.